Hey, what is up everyone? In this video I want to discuss different ways to protect yourself while playing in the main Sea of Thieves high seas mode. If you're someone who typically plays safer seas and are ready to make the move to the main game, or you're just someone who wants to learn some tips about surviving in the open world, this video is for you. So I have been playing Sea of Thieves since it launched back in 2018, and in that time I have learned various ways to protect my treasure so I could advance to Pirate Legend and beyond. For this video I want to focus on completing voyages in high seas. For others, tips like sailing or world events, I'll leave a link in the card here because I have a bunch of other videos covering different topics like that. The first thing you need to decide in high seas when starting a voyage is whether or not you want to sail as an emissary. Sailing as an emissary can be great because it will boost the amount of gold and reputation you can earn for that trading company, but it will also make you a higher target. If you're really new to the game and you're not very experienced with PvP, I would recommend against putting up an Emissary Flag. Ships with Emissary Flags are hunted down and other players will try to sink you to steal your flag. Now with that said, let's discuss the voyage itself. When you start a voyage, you'll have a couple of locations you need to visit. You should plot all of these places on your ship's map table. Then you should start at the islands that are closest to the center of the map or the biggest islands. The reason is because these are the riskiest locations on your voyage. The center of the map has the most traffic of other players sailing through it, so doing this first will, for one, get these out of the way early, but if you were also to lose your ship while at one of these locations, you won't lose as much. Same applies to the big islands. I try to get big islands out of the way first and then move on to the smaller ones. This is because when you're on one of these big islands, it can be difficult to keep an eye out for other ships that are around you. Then even if you were to see the ship coming, you have a longer time to run to your ship on one of these islands. However, there are some advantages with bigger islands. The main one being that you can hide your ship if you park in a good spot. You should try to determine where players may be sailing past and then park on the opposite side of the island from that. Basically, think of this as out of sight, out of mind. If they can't see you, then they won't have any reason to come over to the island you're at. So how can you determine this? A good rule of thumb is park on the opposite side from the center of the map. For example, if you're at Old Faithful Isle, I would park on the northern side of the island away from other players' sites. Now another challenge to consider with these big islands is where the treasure actually is. With some voyages like skeleton voyages, you won't really be able to plan this out. But with something like a treasure map, you can. Typically when I go to one of these big islands, I'll look first for the buried treasure furthest away from where I parked, because then I can work my way back to the ship. Doing this will allow you to stay closer to your ship once you have more loot that you need to protect. Moving on, this next tip is really important. Don't get greedy. Many players love to stack their loot and have big hauls of treasure. In safer seas you can do this because there isn't anyone to worry about. But in high seas, there is, and having a shiny ship full of treasure will make many players keen on sinking you. While you may have other players fight you when you don't have that much treasure, if you don't have much to steal, most players will eventually give up if you outlast them long enough. But if you do have a large hole, then many players will continue to pursue you. So with all that said, you should be selling your treasure every time you get to the point where you have enough treasure that if you lost it, you'd be upset about it. When selling, there's a few things you can try to do to make the process better. First one depends on whether or not you're on a captain ship. If you do not have a captain ship and have enough gold, then you should definitely get one because it gives you the ability to sell to the Sovereign. The Sovereign will take any treasure except for Reaper loot or anything meant for a specific person. This is a huge time saver because it basically makes any outpost good enough to sell at. The Sovereign tent also has a harpoon which allows you to quickly grab the treasure off your ship and get it right next to the person you need to sell to. If you are a newer player though and can't get a captain ship, that's okay. But that means we need to think a bit harder on where to sell at and what to sell. Each outpost is laid out differently, so you should try to go to an outpost where it will be the shortest distance between you and the person to sell to. Here's another video that covers this exact topic and helps you understand which outposts you should be going to. Another thing that goes along with this that you should do is separate your loot into piles as you sail to the outpost. Put your high value treasure in a pile to sell first and then have your other treasure in a separate pile. This will help you make sure you're prioritizing the right things to sell in case you cannot sell everything because someone starts approaching, whatever may be the case, it will help you make sure you get the most valuable thing sold. If you want to be fancy, you can even separate it by trading companies so it's easier to know which item goes where. But what do you do if you're attacked or you have an attack inbound? Like I mentioned earlier, it's important to be aware of your surroundings. Keep an eye on any ship that may be approaching, and be flexible enough to change your plans and go to a different island if there are other players in the area. If another crew starts to pursue you, then get on your ship and begin sailing away. I'll link a video here about how to sail better and not get caught, but the most important thing to know is which way to sail. Depending on your ship, you'll want to sail in a certain direction to get away from your opponents. On a sloop, sail against the wind. On a brig, sail with crosswind. And on a galleon, sail with the wind. This will make it so your ship goes faster than the other ships. But if you and your opponent are on the same ship type, they may be able to still catch up to you. This is when you're going to have to start fighting. In this situation, your priority should be to get away and out of sight of your opponent. Once you get your ship moving in the right direction, ensure you're not going to hit anything for a long time. Then you can try and board your opponent. It's important to understand your goals when boarding. For this situation, all we care about is stopping and keeping the enemy immobile long enough for your ship to get away and out of sight. Try to anchor the opponent and keep them from raising it again. Just be careful not to leave your ship for too long. And when I say that, I'm talking about in the situation that you might be playing solo. If you have a teammate with you, then you should be good. You just have one person that stays on the wheel and keeps you going away while the other person distracts the opponent. A successful board can make a huge difference when being chased. You can also use other environmental factors to help. Stuff like fog or storms can hide your ship and allow you to get away. You can also use stuff like large rocks or big islands, which you can try to mess with your opponent by kind of going around it and changing direction to hopefully throw them off. It's good to be creative when in these situations and try to outsmart your opponent. I'm planning to make a future video where I dive more into this topic, so keep a lookout for that in the future. If you're really worried about encountering other players, there's another way to avoid others, and it will actually earn you more gold. Rather than doing your voyage in the main Sea of Thieves regions, you can instead do a voyage over the Devil's Roar, which will actually reward you with additional gold. This region is a bit more dangerous in the sense that there's volcanoes and other environmental factors, but in terms of other players, it's usually pretty quiet over there, as most players don't like spending much time in that region. Over in this region, the same tips that we've already went over still apply, so keep selling often and planning your voyages strategically. Finally, the last piece of advice I have for this video is just try to remain calm and remember that it's okay to lose sometimes. It's natural to become very stressed when doing a voyage in high seas, and especially when being chased. But if you can remain calm, you'll be able to take strategic action rather than make anxiety-filled mistakes. Keep in mind that even if you lose your treasure, it's okay and it's just part of the game. You'll sometimes win some battles and you'll lose some battles. If you listen to my earlier advice about selling often, then hopefully you won't lose that much and it won't be that big of a deal. But that covers some of my tips for protecting yourself while on a voyage in high seas. Definitely check out some of my other videos I mentioned earlier. Those will be really helpful for you for learning some other additional skills to help with this. But if you enjoyed this video, it'd be great to like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see y'all later. Bye y'all.